Now at this point, we've manually moved the spawner off the screen. One thing we can do though is we could nest this inside of our floor so that when the floor expands, it moves the spawner along with it. Let's select our spawner and let's zoom in a little bit more. Since the bottom of every object that spawns is going to be here at the center point of the spawner, let's try to center this inside of the floor. Also, because we're working with pixel art, let's try to avoid using fractions. Here we'll set this position to whole numbers. Now, if we nested the spawner into the foreground and rerun the game, when we zoom out, you'll now see that the spawner will always be positioned towards the end of the screen. Now, as this continues to stretch, there'll be more gap between where the spawner is and the floor. So one way we can avoid that is to simply move the spawner over just a little bit more. Now, if we rerun it, we'll see the spawner will be further off the screen, ensuring that when objects come out, you don't see them actually get created. This is a great technique that we can take advantage of throughout our games. You can nest other game objects inside of game objects, or you can create empty game objects to create groups in the hierarchy view. Now, our spawner is a little bit boring. What we want to do is add a delay range so that when it chooses to spawn something, it's between a set interval of time, giving a little bit more randomness to how things are spawned. Let's go and select the spawner script inside of the spawner game object, and by double-clicking on that, it will open up MonoDevelop for us. Let's add a new public property called delay range. We'll make this a vector too. And let's create a new vector, and we'll set the x value to 1 and the y value to 2. Now, just because a vector 2 has an x and y position doesn't mean we couldn't use it for something like a range. This will be the minimum and this will be the maximum, as long as you know that the minimum is x and the maximum is y. So now let's create a new method that'll reset our delay every time we spawn something new. We'll start by making the return type void and call this reset delay. Inside of here, we're now going to override the delay value with a random range. For the minimum, we'll use our delay range, x, and for the maximum, we'll use the delay range, y. Now, let's copy the reset delay method name and paste it to the beginning of our start method. Now, before coroutine gets started, we'll have reset our delay to a random value. And now, after we instantiate a new object, we'll reset the delay as well. If we save our script and go back into our game, when we run it, we should now see that objects will get spawned a little bit more sporadically. Some will be closer, some will be further away. You can tweak these values, such as making the minimum 0.5 and the maximum y to get objects to spawn closer together, or give them a larger range by making y 5, and then you'll have much larger gaps in between when things are spawned. This is useful if you want to increase the difficulty over time by adding more or less objects on the scene as the player gets further in the game. Let's save our scene, and next we'll talk about destroying the objects off of the screen.